Greetings, Disney adults, Disney fans of all ages. If you notice, I have my Peoplemover shirt on today. I'm excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about the Peoplemover. It is one of those attractions that just fills me with nostalgia. I remember growing up and going to the Disney parks with my family. I remember working there as a cast member. And back then, Peoplemover was always one of those go-to attractions because you always knew that the wait was going to be very short, if not walk on. It was wonderful for that reason. As a cast member, I remember many times going to the Disney parks with friends, and they would almost always say, "Hey, we want to ride Space Mountain." But back in the day, I was really not much of a Space Mountain thrill ride type fan. But if you watch like All Ears videos, allears.net, they are great for showing and telling how great it is to go to the parks with friends. So I didn't want to be that friend that was going to say, "Well, I'm not going to ride." I would always say, "Yes, I'll ride Space Mountain with you." But what I would always do is I'd say, before we ride Space Mountain, let's go ride the Peoplemover. And the Peoplemover, that was an opportunity for me to kind of put it off a little bit longer, but it was also an opportunity just for me to kind of breathe, take it slow for a few minutes before we rode Space Mountain. As I said, you used to always have zero wait time, or a very short wait time. Now, if you recall, a few years ago, Peoplemover closed. It closed down for an extended period of time. There were many in the Disney community who thought for sure that this was the end of the Peoplemover at the Magic Kingdom. Much like Disneyland lost their Peoplemover a number of years ago, we who were fans of Disney World and the Magic Kingdom said, "Is our Peoplemover going the way of Disneyland's Peoplemover?" And many people, of course, complained mightily, "Please, please don't let the Peoplemover go away." And when the Peoplemover reopened, I remember Disney YouTubers who went to the parks on the day it reopened. I remember wait times of hours and people riding the Peoplemover, then getting off the Peoplemover, going back in line and riding it again and again and again. And I'm hoping that a serious message was sent to Disney executives to not close the Peoplemover, because Disney fans love the Peoplemover. That said, we have to ask the question, what would Walt think of the Peoplemover? And that's what I want to talk about today. The Peoplemover actually opened after Walt's passing in 1967. So I do want to ask the question, what would Walt think of the Peoplemover? Before we answer that question, though, we do have to have a little bit of a history lesson. So let's go back in time.
And now, guests are ready to travel through the great Disney adventure, an adventure experienced by millions. In the first season alone, these cars, gliding effortlessly along an automated turnpike of tomorrow, traveled a distance equivalent to 34 times around the world. More than 100 bright new convertibles moved continuously, offering fair visitors the ride of a lifetime. As the ride begins, visitors are greeted with a recorded message from Ford Motor Company's chairman of the board.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Henry Ford II. Welcome to Ford Motor Company's Magic Skyway, an adventure created by the incomparable Walt Disney. A voyage through time and space, from a dark and distant yesterday to a bright and promising tomorrow.
We can trace the origins of the Peoplemover back to Ford's Magic Skyway. Remember, we've talked about this before, or if you've studied Walt Disney's life at all, you know about the 1964 World's Fair, when the Disney Company unveiled 4 attractions. There was It's a Small World, Carousel of Progress, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and the 4th one was something called Ford's Magic Skyway. It was an opportunity for you to ride in a brand new Ford Mustang or some other Ford car. They were on an elevated track, and you would ride through various scenes from history. Now, what was important about the Skyway is Imagineers had to figure out a way to keep the cars the same distance apart so they didn't bump into each other, because that would have been bad. So their solution came from the Ford Motor Company itself. They did sort of a conveyor system. This way they guaranteed that the cars always stayed the same distance apart. And that idea translated later into the Peoplemover and how the cars move around the track and how they always stay the same distance from each other. Now for Walt, he was the one who kind of came up with the Peoplemover idea, and the idea was for his new park, was for Epcot Center, also called Progress City in a lot of early material. But in Walt's original dream for Epcot Center, the city of the future, there were going to be three main ways to get around the city. One, of course, just walking. But the other two ways were the Peoplemover and the monorail. But when it came to Epcot, Walt came up with a radial design. At the center was the business district, your downtown area. Then as you moved out from the business district, there were apartments. Then there was kind of a green area with parks and schools and churches. And then out on the edge were family dwellings, family homes. And the Peoplemover was designed to get you from place to place within the city. If you had a home on the outskirts of the city and you wanted to go into town for work or for other business, you would take a Peoplemover. There would be a Peoplemover station if you wanted to go to church or to a school. And then the monorail was designed to take you to other places outside of the city. If you wanted to go, say, to Magic Kingdom, or to the Disney World Park, or to the Industrial Center, or to the airport, there was a monorail that would connect all of those various areas. And that was what you could use to get to those places. But within the city itself was the Peoplemover. Now again, Walt Disney passed away in 1966, but that coincided with a major renovation of Tomorrowland. And after that major renovation of Tomorrowland, the Disney Imagineers opened the Peoplemover at Disneyland in 1967. Sort of a shout out to Walt's original idea for Epcot. And then when Disney World opened in 1972, it was just a couple of years later, in 1975, that we got our own version of the Peoplemover, albeit a little bit different. The Disneyland version actually had tires on it. Also in the Disneyland version, each car was covered while the track was open. Whereas the Disney World version, the track is covered while each of the cars is open, and the Disney World version instead runs on a magnetic induction motor as opposed to tires. But the idea is basically the same. They always move at the same speed. The track never stops, so the ride never stops. They are always moving, always moving. And it gives you a nice, relaxed view of Tomorrowland, sort of from above. At both Disneyland and Disney World, you would actually go through some of the attractions, so you could actually see some of the attractions before you rode them, or after you rode them, if that's the case. Now, the Disneyland version closed sometime in the 90s, but fortunately, we still have the version in the Magic Kingdom. Like I said, it's one of my favorites. I really love it. But let's ask the question. What would Walt think? I'm not sure. Were I to guess, here's what I would say. I would say that Walt would come in and say, why didn't you use my idea the way I intended to use it? Now, the Magic Kingdom version is awesome, and I think Walt would be fine with it, with the fact that we're boarding a people mover and we're seeing, oh, this is what a transportation system of the future could look like. But I believe Walt would say, why doesn't it go anywhere? Why is it just you get on, you get off at the same place all the time? I believe Walt would say my original vision was for a people mover that would carry you from one place to another place to another place, so you didn't have to walk everywhere. Whereas the people mover in Tomorrowland doesn't do that. Like the original monorail, it just goes around a loop and comes back to where it started. But you remember the monorail at Disneyland, later on they added stops at the Disneyland Hotel, and later on they added stops at Downtown Disney. So the monorail at Disneyland has 3 different places where it goes. The monorail at Disney World, if you recall from my monorails video, is never even inside the parks. It is always outside the parks, but it is a mode of transportation. And I believe Walt would say, why didn't you do that with the people mover? And in particular, since we built a version of Epcot Center, my big question, and I think Walt's big question would be, why is there no people mover at Epcot? And I think that's what Walt would say. I think he would like the people mover, but I think he would say, why didn't you go farther with it? Why didn't you do what I actually wanted it to do? I've got an idea, and I want you to hear me out. I'm going to go off the rails just a little bit here, but let's see what you think. We're at Connections Cafe and Eatery in the new Epcot Center, and we notice over to the side is an escalator. Maybe it's one of those moving ramps, kind of like you have at Tomorrowland People Mover. So you get on it and you go up and you're at the top of Connections. And there's a People Mover station. So you board the People Mover, and the People Mover takes you out, takes you past Spaceship Earth, gives you a nice aerial view of Moana's water attraction. You see the land over to the side, Journey into Imagination, and somewhere past Journey into Imagination, before you get into Canada, there's another People Mover station. Your choice, you can either get off the People Mover at that place, slide down, and then you're right there at the World Showcase, or you can stay on the People Mover. You choose to stay on the People Mover, and it keeps taking you around. And you begin a journey around World Showcase, around the World Showcase Lagoon. There's another People Mover station at American Adventure, so you can get off there if you'd like. Go visit the American Adventure or the World Showcase pavilions right around there, or you can just stay on. It continues to follow around the World Showcase Lagoon. Takes you past Mexico, somewhere between Mexico, the Odyssey restaurant, there's another People Mover station. Where again, you can get off, maybe go visit the Odyssey, Mexico Pavilion, maybe you can visit Test Track. You stay on, and the People Mover takes you around. You've got a view over that little lake area. You've got a view of Test Track. You can see Mission Space, but then you come back to where you started, Connections Cafe. It makes a full loop around all of World Showcase with stops at various points along the way, which is exactly what Walt Disney originally intended for the People Mover. I know, someone's going to write back and say, do you know how much that would cost? Yeah, it would cost a lot of money. Wouldn't it be awesome to have one of Walt's visions for Epcot be done at Epcot? I think Walt would say, that's awesome. If you have connections to a Disney Imagineer, go ahead and forward this video to them and let them have a look at it. What do you think? Why don't you let me know in the comments below? Comment, give me a like, subscribe to my channel, please. Hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope to see you at Disney World very soon.